What's up, guys? It's Armin. I'm a head coach at Poker with Risk, and today I'm bringing you guys a high stakes hand analysis for two hands that I played this month on America's Card Room. I thought they were somewhat interesting and worth talking about, so let's dive right in. We're about 236 blinds, 237 blinds effective, and I opened the button to 2.5 blinds and villain defense. He checks, and I see bet quarter pot, which generally indicates a high frequency flop c-bet. And on a board like this, where there's not a made straight yet, and it's relatively disconnected, 7 and the 4 have some straight connectivity, so I'm probably going to be betting most of my range here. And out of position should have to float pretty wide. They have to float most backdoor spades, pretty much most hands that have a single have one club in them that I'm drawing to the backdoor flush draw, and any pair on the board and any ace high. Out of position, check raises to around 50% pot, maybe a little bit more. And this is going to be, it could be any pair on the board, mostly top pair, and flush draws, backdoor flush draws, straight draws. Jack 10 with a club, 9-8 with a club sometimes is reasonable. So I call. I'm gonna have to defend relatively wide here, because if I'm c-betting most of my range, I can't just fold everything that doesn't immediately have equity, right? So I'm gonna have to call. It's a small flop check raise, so in position should have to call hands like 9-8 off with a club, Jack 10 off with a club, 9-8 of spades, any pair on the board, any pocket pair. Yeah, gonna have to continue a lot here. Turn brings an 8, so 6-5 gets there, and the backdoor flush draw comes in. So I'd say that favors, the backdoor flush draw coming in would favor me a bit, because I'm gonna call more backdoor flush draws than he's gonna check raise. So, and the straight completing neutralizes the nut advantage a bit. Well, actually, in position probably has a slight nut advantage, because the big blind should be 3-betting 6-5 suited, and check calling some 6-5 off on the flop. So it isn't a straightforward. This is a really good turn for out of position, right? So out of position over bets, completely fine size. It's a polarizing bet, so I would say it's essentially 2 pair plus for out of position, and pair plus straight draws. Ace-5 off with the ace of clubs is a reasonable hand to bluff with. 10-9 off with a club. 9-6 suited. That check raised the flop, so 9-6 clubs. That didn't 3-bet the pre-flop. Overbets, and I call. It's generally going to be calling draws and hands that could improve. I mean, I have some good top pairs that I'm going to call that can't improve as conveniently versus straights, drawing dead versus straights, but drawing live to worst 2 pair. River is basically a brick. Neither player is going to have much Jack 9. I would say in position probably has a bit more Jack 9, because actually it's kind of close. In position has Jack 9 of clubs and spades. Out of position has some Jack 9 offsuit maybe, and it's pretty rare. So I would say that River's going to leave most things unchanged. Yeah, and the out of position player overbets again. It's a bit of an in-between size. I guess all in would be quite big. It'd be shoving 200 blinds into like 60. So he chooses this size instead, which to me would indicate the worst hand you could have for value here is 7-4 is pushing a little bit, but 7-4 is okay. And as far as bluff catching goes for imposition, anything that isn't 2 pair is a bluff catcher, right? So it's not a straightforward call with the hands that are worse than 2 pair. And I mean, I would go further as far as saying that some 2 pair is even foldable. If 7-4 is a bit too weak for this size, then you could start folding hands that are on par with 7-4. But the one thing I'd say is when in position is thinking about bluff catching, the number one thing is blocking value, and unblocking. And number 2 thing is unblocking bluffs. So when a position is facing an overbet, 2 pairs is going to block a lot of value for the most part, unless you have like 10-8 clubs exactly. So, you know, having hands with a 7 and a 4 to block villains, pocket 7s, pocket 4s, queen 7, 7-4, 6-5. You want to have hands that block straights and the 2 pairs while, you know, unblocking bluffs. So what would out of position be bluffing with here? We would say, you know, 9 deuce of clubs, 6-3 of clubs, 6, you know, maybe jack 6 of spades that check raise the flop. There's not too many hands here left for villain to bluff with, but you know, if you have any type of removal to a straight, it's probably worth sticking at a bet. And I would say spades are probably better to bluff for out of position than clubs, because I'm gonna have more club floats than spade floats. So, you know, he overbets, I call. He shows 9 deuce of spades, and I show ace queen off. I would say, you know, deuce 9 is a bit aggressive. It's borderline full on the flop, probably is a full on the flop. And so flop seems a bit aggressive from villain, but turns fine. River's probably very good because it kind of checks all the boxes. You want to unblock clubs, so you unblock immediate folds, and you know, you block some value, so you block jack 9 of spades, which is nice. And there's not a whole lot to bluff with, right? You know, a hand like this is better to bluff with than a hand like, you know, ace 5 with the ace of clubs, because I'm gonna have a lot more folds to hold the ace of clubs, right? And yeah, and as far as my hand goes, it's not a hand I'd call every time. It's reasonable bluff catcher. I block some queen 7 and queen 4. And I unblock bluffs. I'm not going to really see a bluff out of villain that includes an offsuit ace, right? Or that, you know, even, yeah, it's tough for villain to bluff with an ace here. So let's dive into the solution and see where I went wrong with the analysis and what stands and what doesn't, right? Okay, so let's dive into the solution. High frequency flop c-bet, followed by a check raise. I believe he check raised to like 5.8 blinds, so let's try to match his size. Around 60% pot. Check raising some second pair, some top pair, queen jack, queen 10, queen 9, top pair that can draw a better 2 pair. And sets. Straight draws, yep. About what we said. Nothing really shocking here. 9 deuce, flop fold. We can see where the threshold kind of kicks in. 9-5 suited starting to continue. 10-6 suited check raises. Jack 6 calls. So not entirely like wrong, but it's a bit wide. You kind of want to have more connectivity to the 7 and 4 from what it looks like. Check raise in position, folding 9-8 with the 9-8 in general, calling 10-9, Jack 10. So I was a bit wide calling the flop check raise, so both players were a bit wide in the spot. Call and turn 8. Solver picks pot. Overbet is negligible. Betting half the range, checking top pair, continuing, you know, checking some sets, and even checking some 2 pair. So not going out and just betting everything. We are throwing in some checks, so he bets 150% pot, and this is our defending range. Not very many raising. If we're raising, it's essentially 6-5 in bluffs. Even folding some top pair. We're folding top pair that, just top pair, queen jack in general. Queen 10 unblocking spades and clubs. Wow, ace queen's actually just folding right away with an ace of clubs and an ace of spades and a queen of spades. So I guess that would mean, queen of spades blocks queen 5 of spades, queen 6 of spades. I guess those hands are actually merges, right? So if we're holding the queen of spades, it's less likely we're running into a hand like that, and more likely we're running into a hand like 2 pair or, you know, 6-5 for a set. call, and river 10. Pretty much a brick. Solver plays pot and all in, which seems reasonable to me. The fact that we saw size that's in between these, it wouldn't shock me if we can take out the all-in size and that size, the pot size, and just do one size in between. That's reasonable to me. It's also reasonable to just do both all-in and 150. It's a bit weird to make those two sizes exactly, but you usually want to separate them a bit more. But for the sake of not knowing what the villain strategy is exactly, we might as well look at both sizes. So 9 deuce is not in his range, but I would be pretty confident to say that if it was, it would be bluffing the river here every time. I'm trying to see if I can find a hand that can replicate 9 deuce of spades, and it's tough to actually find one. It would, what, jack 6 spades didn't check raise, 10 6 of spades did, and 10 6 spades pairs up on the river. So let's go ahead and just wheel out an overbet and see what our hand does. Our hand mainly folds. It's mixed, so calling it sometimes is reasonable, and you know, if out of position is bluffing by a combo or more, then it becomes much more reasonable of a call. If they're under bluffing, then you know, you probably want to let it go. So it isn't so straightforward as calling, you know, we have good top pair. It mostly bricked out, a lot of the draws missed, so we get to just call every time. That isn't the case. So, you know, if we mess around with the solution a bit, say he's continuing some 9 deuce, let's try to just do 9 deuce suited, and let's throw in some jack 6 suited, why not? Node lock it without locking the hands, so it can compensate for value. Get to the turn, and does 9 deuce overbet? It does, or it pots, but an overbet, it's going to be probably doing it as well. It overbets, we call, and river 10. Let's go back to strategy we'd set. Honestly, this size honestly looks small. Let's see what exactly he bet on the river. He bet, no, he bet 99, around 99 blinds. Face an overbet, and now our hand's more of a fold. His hand is more of a pure river bluff, so I'd say he played his hand generally okay. Flop was a bit wide. He could be over bluffing in the spot. Don't know for sure. And you know, my hand, it's tough to go wrong. Strategy and EV, it's very close. It's losing 3 blinds to call, and it's 0 to fold, of course. So it's a very close spot. Losing 3 chips is not good. If he's over bluffing, then it becomes a more reasonable spot to call, but not very straightforward with one pair hands. You know, if we have queen 6, queen 5, it's a better bluff catcher because, you know, we block 2 pair while blocking straights. And I think a big thing to note here is you don't really want to call queen 6 and queen 5 while holding the 6 or 5 of spades or clubs, because that's where the bluffs are coming from. If you look at the solver, spades and clubs are going to fold every time, and the other combos are going to mix. So bluff catching is very sensitive to your side card and whether you block value or not. So, you know, queen 5 and queen 6 might be a call, aces and kings are an easy fold. So those are things to pay attention for whenever we're in a situation that involves facing very large bets on multiple streets. Let's move on to the next hand. For our second hand, we are gonna be just a bit over 100 blinds effective. We open the button 2.5 blinds, big blind 3 bets, 10 blinds, we call. Everything standard so far as far as sizing. Pre-flop, in position is going to be defending some offsuit broadways like queen jack off, queen 10 off, jack 10 offsuit. A a lot of suited gappers and 3 gappers, even some 4 gappers. And out of position, it's going to be 3-betting hands like 6s, 7s plus for pocket pairs, a lot of broadways, a lot of suited broadways mainly, less queen jack off and queen 10 off than in position, and less suited hands than in position, but there's still going to be quite a bit of suited hands, a lot of suited connectors and some suited gappers. And out of position can take a few different approaches for this flop. They could do, a big bet and a lot of checking. They could do a small bet and less checking, and both are pretty reasonable on a board like this, even though it's pretty wet. When there's a wet board, it generally favors in position because equity realization is tougher for out of position because the board changes so much on turn and river. So villain bets small. They do a 3rd pot bet, probably a range bet, and if not, so the checking range is very small. We're going to be calling hands that are pocket pairs, some ace highs, backdoor clubs, any straight draw, any pair on the board. Call. Turns a queen that brings in the flush, as previously discussed. The queen pairing is better for in position because there's more offsuit queen X in the 3-bet calling range than there is in the 3-bet range. Both players are going to have ace queen off and king queen off, but in position is going to have queen jack and queen 10. And in position is also going to have more flushes because they're going to call more suited hands to the 3-bet than the 3-better actually raises pre-flop. So I would say in position or out of position is supposed to check this turn quite a bit, especially after betting most of their range on the flop. They're going to have a lot of air. So out of position checks, completely reasonable. I expect all types of hands in this range as strong as flushes. I actually expect quite a bit of flushes in out of position's range because of how bad this turn card is for them. They should be checking a lot, and that means that they're going to need to protect their checking range. I bet half pot, kind of a medium size, allows you to bet trips and flushes, and a little bit worse than that even. So I guess the thinnest value bet here would probably be like a 9, good 9. And still checking back quite a bit of good hands. I'm going to check back flushes here, check back some trips. And as far as bluffs go, you can start with some under pairs, some straight draws, some offsuit high cards with a heart. And outside of that, you can bluff with so much here. Both ranges are very wide. And one thing I guess to be cautious of is because out of position is checking a lot, in position can't go crazy for value, right? Just because you have, a hand like jacks or 10s that seems really nice. It seems like the best hand a lot of the time. It's not a hand that you're going to bet more than one street. And, the same kind of applies for a hand like trips, which we're going to see here on the river. He calls, he checks on the river 7, and I check back. Showdown is ace king off with a heart, completely reasonable. Could check raise a turn sometimes to go along with some flushes or maybe even some, good trips. And I show down queen 10, so medium to good trips. On the surface, maybe we could bet the hand again on the river for 2/3, or maybe half pot or 2/3. But because out of position has so many flushes and even better trips that I don't even think it's worth that. So that's something we should look at when we hop into the simulation. And if I'm checking back queen 10, what am I value betting? Right now it looks like a flush, and I would go as far as saying, good trips, ace king or ace queen with a heart is safe. I'd say king queen if I have it. I would not bet it without a heart. Ace queen, it's really close. I think I would. I think I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't. So I'd probably just play on and check and play ace queen and above, and then king queen with a heart. And then bluffs, single heart hands are reasonable. You could even, could we bluff an under pair here? Maybe. I think I would mainly stick to high card with a heart, like king jack with a heart, king 10 with a heart. And then, save the other types of hands for different rivers, because On this river, nothing really improved for us. It's essentially a brick for our betting range. And, you know, the one thing that changes on the river is out of position rivers and pocket sevens. So let's dive into the solution and see what's going on. Okay, so this is a solution we set up. High frequency third pot bets. Checking range mainly includes ace high and, you know, pairs below the queen and some sets. So he bets a third. We call, but let's look at what we're supposed to call. It's supposed to start folding some under pairs without a heart and even folding some backdoor clubs. So for calling clubs, it's actually with an overcard to the 6 and, you know, some ace high. Call, turn, queen. Solver is only betting 22% of the range, so that indicates that this is not the best turn for out of position, right? And what we see is betting fairly tight, right? And even checking a lot of trips and checking a lot of flushes. So mainly checking the spot, not a whole lot to add there. We check, and now we get to our range. The preferred size is 40% from the GTO Wizard AI. I bet half pot, it's negligible, doesn't really make a difference. So we bet half, some under pairs start bluffing some flush draws and betting some trips and flushes, and betting some nines. Do we bet tens? Not really. Some nines with a flush draw, if it's a worse 9. Okay, so some 9x, mainly trips and flushes. Betting 60% of our trips and 60% of our flushes, so close to half. We bet half pot, and out of position is mainly calling overcards with a heart, and pretty much a hand that like is made. So pocket pairs, pair on the board, even some pairs on the board are folding. 6-5's folding, 6-7's folding. They can't really improve that well and aren't really strong enough versus the range that I'd be betting. I'd say if we're gonna face a check raise, it's mainly gonna be for a bigger size than min. So I'll change the size a little bit for the sake of, you know, what actually might happen in practice. So some trips and some flushes go along with some flush draws. 9-6 is check raising, probably for the purpose of having bluffs on a 4 flush river and to fold out some better 9x. Ace-9 starts folding. You actually kind of merge. You get some value out of single heart hands. You don't actually fold out much 9x. It's very little, so I would say it's essentially not even a merge. It's very, very low amounts of folding from any hands that are better. So he called, he didn't raise. And we got the river 7. Now let's take out every donk. And the AI bets 67 on all in. And 67 is essentially centered around ace queen and king queen with a heart, it looks like. Yeah. And for all in, ace queen does start squeezing in there, so it's very close. And, you know, some ace queens even checking. So it kind of depends on how protected villain is compared to theory. So our hand checking every time. So it's looking like we played it. Our analysis was pretty solid, and when we played it in game, it was pretty accurate. Bluffs, under pairs not bluffing. I guess they have enough showdown value versus single heart hands. And then we have some king jack and king tens with a heart, and some 10-8 got there. That actually that's a hand I missed. So 10-8, we improved to 10-8. Out of position doesn't really. So that's a hand that's interesting. Ace-9 with a heart is shoving. So that one is going to have to be a merge. You're going to be folding out some 10s and jacks and getting called by some 9-8. Yeah. Folding out some kings and some aces as well. So folding out some better hands, folding out some trips for all in, something to note. when ace-9 bets, it's mainly betting all in. It's not really betting 67 as much. If we bet 67, queen-jack and queen-10 are calls. You know, jacks, 10s, and kings are still mainly folding. They're pretty essentially pure folds. Ace-king with a heart's calling sometimes, though. That's very interesting. So having the ace is relatively important because instead of double blocking king-10 with pocket kings, double blocking king-jack and king-10, pocket jacks and 10s, you only single block it, and you know, you block a lot of value. You block king-queen, actually king-queen. This is for 67. If we go all in, ace-king's a fold. So 67 means you block blocking trips is more important than blocking flushes, because most of the flushes end up going all in. So that's very interesting when it comes to removal. So blocking ace-queen is very important, and you know, not double blocking bluffs is fairly important too. So that's an important thing to see, and actually, you know, it's very interesting. It's also interesting to see that ace-9 is like merging, folding out some better hands, and getting called by other bluff catchers like, you know, 9-8 that blocks pocket 9s and queen 9 and some flushes. And yeah, I think the important thing to take away from this hand is, you know, it's just having a strong hand heads up doesn't necessarily entail a bet. So queen 10, queen jack, even king queen, essentially always checking. King queen with a heart is when we start sliding over to strong enough to value bet, versus a range that mainly is calling with, you know, flushes, trips is folding a chunk of the time, and the other hands don't bluff catch too often because of how protected out of position is. So, yeah, I don't really have much else to add. I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. If you guys see some cool hand histories for high stakes, feel free to DM it to me on Twitter, and I might consider reviewing it for a future video. These hands that I showed are only ever going to be hands that have seen Showdown. If you guys are interested in seeing my hands that haven't seen Showdown, then there's a link in the description that sends you to our website, and you can apply it to the CFP, and then maybe you'll see some of my non-Showdown hands. Because, you know, gun to my head, I'm not going to show you guys those. I hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.